Alright, we have more changes unfolding in the world of global aristocrats. Changes that have one man with an alternative viewpoint from all the rest stroll on into the WEF annual summit this week. And I'm sure you've all heard about the craziness that happened in Davos, right? Davos, Switzerland. Each year, all these top politicians, world leaders, kings, queens, titans of industry, everyone on the who's who list of elites, basically the aristocrats. The people who put themselves on a pedestal, put themselves above all the rest of us, people like Bill Gates, Larry Page from Google, all the people who are part of the current wave of technocrats. Well, 2,400 of them are invited to the annual summit. Almost all of them share the same vision of the future, how they want to mold the world into their version of utopia, dystopian utopia. So anyways, they invited one person this time, though, who isn't on board with this. Now, why would they do that? Probably in an attempt to help aid in their research of what the adversary looks like, because you have to realize the people at the WEF are wound so tightly in their elite bubbles, they don't realize that they could just turn on YouTube or turn on some alternative media source to see what people who disagree with them are talking about. Your typical dinner table conversation from a middle-class American family, they'd probably label as misinformation or dangerous disinformation. And we'll get to that in a minute, because that was like the entire plot this year at the event. The principal message was we all have to come together in 2024, all 2,400 of us, and defeat misinformation, as it's the number one threat to our world order, to democracy. Watch the president of the EU deliver her opening remarks. Actually, before we do that, I just want to say thank you for liking and sharing these videos. It really helps me out. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you continue to receive these regular updates. Also, check out our daily show over at the NotifyAmerica YouTube channel. The link is in the description. Here's her opening remarks. Again, this is the president of the European Union, Ursula von der Leyen. Listen to her. Watch this.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear Klaus, your annual global risk report makes for a stunning and sobering read. For the global business community, the top concern for the next 2 years is not conflict or climate. It is disinformation and misinformation, followed closely by polarization within our societies. These risks are serious because they limit our ability to tackle the big global challenges we are facing. Changes in our climate and our geopolitical climate.
Now, there's a lot of people out there, liberal pundits usually, sometimes conservative pundits as well, who say all this focus on the WEF is a waste of time. They aren't attacking capitalism, these people. All the virtue signaling is just for show. They're doing this to keep capitalism alive. Well, they're completely mistaken. Leadership at the WEF are ideologues. They are idealistic. They're as idealistic as you can get. Look, if all they cared about was the bottom line, then explain ESG to me. Why would they be pushing ESG? We have the numbers. ESG has hurt the bottom line by 28% or something crazy like that. They oppose libertarianism. They support big, giant, centralized government. That's what they support. That's the goal. A giant techno-state. And it's important to call it out because these people in this room, in that event, those 2,400 people, have more influence than any politician. All right, so who was the person, though, that they invited that was outside their bubble? And no, I'm not referring to the witch doctor they had come on stage and perform a ritualistic ceremony, because yes, that really happened. But seriously, though, I'm referring to Kevin Roberts, the president of conservative think tank the Heritage Foundation, someone that represents an organization who fights for conservative principles, that type of thing. And at the moment, his organization is opposed to this globalist agenda. Again, likely inviting him there so they can look in the eye of their adversary, do some due diligence on their opponent. Well, he delivered a straightforward message to these people, asserting that the problem isn't misinformation or disinformation, whatever that means. Instead, you people are the problem, not the solution. Now, we're going to watch the full clip in a minute because it's worth watching, believe me, but just for some context, it was his turn to speak during a discussion, like a round table discussion titled What to Expect from a Possible Republican Administration, and he went on to emphasize the need for every member of a potential Republican administration to compile a list of proposals from the WEF, from the very organization he's speaking to, and object to all of them wholesale. It was epic. He stressed that anyone unwilling to challenge the power of unelected bureaucrats and return it to the American people is just unfit to be part of the next Republican administration, i.e. Nikki Haley. And before we play this, just realize most of these people who were at this summit are the same people who've been trying to keep a blanket over society the last few years, keep us all restrained, in their eyes protected, prohibit us from talking. All during the pandemic, we all saw this clearly. Say the wrong thing, say something not approved by the WHO or the New York Times, and you're canceled, censored, shadow banned, pre-screened and approved messages only. We just watched Ursula von der Leyen's opening remarks at the event saying misinformation, disinformation, most pressing threat that we face, how it's stopping us from achieving our goals. Yeah, that's really called democracy, right? The people talking about policy and trying to hash out amongst each other, the American people doing that, somehow that's not democratic.
These risks are serious because they limit our ability to tackle the big global challenges we are facing. Changes in our climate.
Clearly, the democratic process is just too tedious for them. It's too messy. It slows down progress. Now watch Kevin Roberts call them out on this, be as blunt and based as he could with them, something I'm sure they relish. The fight I'm referring to, I'm sure they relish. Well, here's the exchange. Watch.
Let me come back. Kevin, let me come to you because I said it's quite good in the way that Jerry set it up. What did the president, what do you think, President Trump, he's the president from being the former president, but if there were a new President Trump, what does he mean by retribution? What is the issue, calling out very specifically a former Attorney General and former Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and so on? I mean, it sounds very personal. And you said yourself a minute ago, anyone who's kind of not with the program is not going to be in an administration. One thing that Davos, you might say, and the people come here stand up for is liberal democracy. So if the idea that's going to be swept under the table is part of the idea, hopefully that's not what he means. What do you mean? What do you think he means by retribution?
Well, it's laughable that you would, or anyone would describe Davos as protecting liberal democracy. It's equally,
standing up for it.
It's equally laughable to use the word dictatorship at Davos and aim that at President Trump. In fact, I think that's absurd. But I'm going to step aside from that constructive criticism and instead answer your question.
Yep.
And I'm going to be substantive here. President Trump, if he's the next president, for that matter, I think whoever the next conservative president is going to take on the power of the elites, which I mentioned earlier. But the thing that I want to drive home here, the very reason that I'm here at Davos, is to explain to many people in this room and who are watching, with all due respect, nothing personal, but that you're part of the problem. Political elites tell the average people on 3 or 4 or 5 issues that the reality is X, when in fact reality is Y. Take immigration. Elites tell us that open borders and even illegal immigration are okay. The average person tells us in the United States that both rob them of the American way of life. They're right. President Trump will take that on behalf of the average American. Elites also tell us that public safety isn't a problem in big American cities. Just travel to New York or Washington or Dallas, Texas. The average person will tell you that the lack of public safety damages not just the American way of life, but their life. President Trump will take that on. Thirdly, I guess the favorite at the World Economic Forum is climate change. Elites tell us that we have this existential crisis with so-called climate change, so much so that climate alarmism is probably the greatest cause for mental health crisis in the world. The solutions, the average person know, based on climate change are far worse and more harmful and cost more human lives, especially in Europe during the time that you need heating, than do the problem and the problems themselves. Fourth, 2 more here, Robin. Okay. The fourth, China. The number one adversary, not just to the United States, but to free people on planet Earth. Not only do we at Davos not say that, we give the Chinese Communist Party a platform. Count on President Trump ending that nonsense. And fifth, as we sit here, another supranational organization, the World Health Organization, is discussing foisting gender ideology upon the global South. These are practices that are under review, if not being rejected, by countries in Northern Europe. The new president, especially if it's President Trump, will, as you like to say, trust the science. He will understand the basic biological reality of manhood and womanhood. And do you know why? Not because of retribution, not because he's a dictator, but because he has the power of the American people behind him. And it's connected to Senator Portman's excellent point that in addition to needing a vigorous executive, we look forward to having the popular will inform both the House and Senate in 2025 to pass laws on all of those issues and many others. Ultimately, Robin, I think President Trump, if in fact he wins a second term, is going to be inspired by the wise words of Javier Milei, who said that he was in power not to guide sheep, but to awaken lions. That's what the average American and the average free person on planet Earth wants out of leaders.
All right, that wraps up this episode. Like, subscribe. We'll see you next time. Also, don't forget to check out our daily show over at the Notify America YouTube channel. The link is in the description.